Alrighty. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome this afternoon to the Ukrainian Executed Renaissance. My name is Ogunquit. I'm the Director of Visitor Services here at the House of the Seven Gables, and I'm so honored to welcome you guys to one more of our Ukrainian lecture series here this year. And I know I'm seeing a lot of familiar faces here, so thank you for those of you who've been regularly attending. All proceeds from this afternoon's lecture do go to Dover, New England, as do any of your purchases made out back there. Dover, New England is a Ukrainian relief fund offering medical supplies, clothing, things of that nature to civilians and troops alike. So all of this is great support for them and great information for you guys. So I am not the person of the hour. I'll hand it over to Oleksandra Kovalchuk of the Odesa Fine Arts Museum to take it away. Thank you very much.
And again, I want to thank the Museum of Seven Gables for hosting this event, for being here for us, no matter what is happening in the country and globally, and for standing with Ukraine as long as it takes. So today, we're going to talk about the 20s and 50s for Ukrainian culture. I've divided this lecture into three parts. The first part, I want to give a brief explanation on how the machinery of repressions worked in Soviet Union before World War II. Then, in the second part, I will explain how it would happen on one of the most vocal histories of Ukrainian writers who lived in one building altogether. And finally, we will talk a little bit about Ukrainian artists, contemporary Ukrainian artists whom we have lost due to the Russia and Russian people who are having this war against Ukraine. So, we will start from the very beginning. After the Communist Revolution in Russian Empire, 1917, they realized that they have a bit of a problem. Like communists are fighting against those who stayed loyal to Russian Empire, who wanted Russian Empire to continue existing in the way of, in one or another way, with the Tsar or in a more democratic way, but still Russian Empire. There were communists. And there were also national states like Ukraine, Georgia, Kazakhstan, Belarus, etc., who wanted to gain independence from Russian Empire and didn't want to become part of the new Russia built by communists. So they had a lot of enemies. They needed to figure out how to very effectively in this condition deal with the number of problems, like traitors, informators, loyalists, etc. They had no infrastructure for jails, obviously, and they had no judges, because at that moment there were only judges whose laws came from Russian Empire, and they wanted to build a different country, absolutely. So that couldn't be applied. So what could they do? They could just execute people really fast and efficiently. So in first years, they are just executing a lot of people who they suspect of betraying communists. Then eventually they move to a bit different groups, and they also have new goals. They needed to build something, so they would put people in labor camps, making them to build something, and then they kill them by labor. So that is continuous going on. Eventually, in 30s, they start their operation against national states like Ukraine, again Georgia, etc., etc. And afterwards, they start purges over themselves, over the Communist Party. And it is curious that in my childhood, I've already learned at school about the Communist purges, about the repressions, but only about the part that was against communists. But I never learned anything about executions of certain classes, like all of the rich people, or aristocracy, or national leaders. So that was happening over, let's say, from From the 7th December 1917, it would, I would say, continue until today. And today it is performed by FSB. You might know this as a KGB. And they had many names, but basically it was inner police of the Soviet Union. Then in 1934, it became NKVD, which was headed, I wanted to show you this, the head of NKVD in this most intense years of repressions and purges was Yagoda, who was then arrested and executed as a traitor. Then Yezhov, who was then arrested and executed as a traitor. And then Beria, guess what? Yes, and this is a little bit of joy when we speak about the history, because each one of them will follow the same fortune. And still, people continue doing this. The machine never stopped. It never meant so much who was in charge. It was always the same thing. And what is important for me here to show is that whenever there is even a certain reason, very clear for some people, why we need some violent machine that works against certain group. It will always and forever, always, it will move to other groups, and it will eventually turn even to those who are very loyal followers of the ideology, because ideology is always about fear. And these tools are created and fulfilled as a tool of terror to keep people afraid and to sustain power. So that is like a frame of what was happening, and then we will move to Ukraine. This is from 1937, also just an illustration for you. That is when the type of repressions has changed, because starting from beginning of 30s, they would arrest him or her now and there. They would send people to concentration camps, but it wasn't like a mass murders or something. Starting from this time, they started sending the limits, the plans for each territory. So each region, each city had to supply a certain amount of executed people. And they would, at the beginning, they would send the lists of people who were to be executed. There were two categories. First is execution, and second is detention in labor camp. And they would send it directly to Stalin and Politburo. And they would write, actually, as you can see over here, these are visas of the Politburo: Kaganovich, Stalin over here, E.S. This is Joseph Stalin's signature. So they were signing, hand signed it and then sent it back. One book could contain about 500 names. And then, very fast, they realized that this is taking too long. And usually this national KGB units and NKVD, they couldn't keep for a long time so many people. It was just impossible. So they said, okay, you just figure it out by yourself. And they stopped sending these albums to Moscow and back. So they started executing people right away in 10 days without a right for appeal. And then eventually they decided that women and children will also follow. Like if you are an enemy of the state, then your wife and the children from 15 go to concentration camp, and younger children go to the orphanage, even to special orphanages with this very strict system. So it was actually like going extremely violent and extremely evil at that point. And we're going now directly to Ukraine, to Kiev. Again, revolutionary times. 9th of March 1917, Ukrainian government proclaims Ukrainian independence. That's a very important day for Ukrainians, when Ukrainian state was proclaimed. And this is just what it said, the proclamation. The age-old chains have fallen. Freedom has come to the entire oppressed population, all the enslaved nations of Russia. The time has also come for your freedom and awakening to a new, free, creative life after a sleep of longer than 2 centuries. The 30 million strong Ukrainian people, for the first time, you will have to declare on your own behalf who you are and how you wish to live as separate nation. And here we are here again, you know, like it was 100 years ago, but we're still here. And afterwards, they found the Ukrainian Academy of Arts, they found Ukrainian theater, they found Ukrainian art schools. This was all forbidden during Russian Empire. And it was very important because Ukrainian state 100 years ago was created by intellectuals. Actually, it was all intellectuals in that first Ukrainian government. And arts, performative arts, poetry, literature, it all was very essential for them. What is happening later? I will return to this slide. And this is Khrushchevsky, the head of Ukrainian state. And when communists realized that it is kind of hard for them to sustain power over such a large territory, that they do have a lot of problems with that. They needed to find an approach to national states to keep them on board. On their side, national states have had their problem. In Ukraine, it's been 3 years of wars, and the national government of Ukraine had very limited resources to sustain the state, actually. So communists made a deal with the national governments that they will join Soviet Union as a separate kind of republic. As you know, in Soviet Union there were all national republics. It was a Ukrainian national republic. But that was bullshit. It never actually happened, and they were always controlled by the center, by Moscow, by Stalin until he died, and then by other leaders. So, in the beginning, Ukrainian intellectuals, leaders, they say, okay, yes, let's take a deal. Let's become Soviet Union, and we will get, and that was part of the deal, we will get to have education in Ukrainian, literature in Ukrainian, poetry in Ukrainian National Art School, etc. And that is why, through the end of 20s, Ukrainian culture is blooming. That is why we call it a renaissance, because there was a really long time of oppression of national arts. And then finally, there was freedom to perform national arts in Ukrainian arts. And that was very important. So a lot of new artists were blooming. It was actually a time of blooming for Ukraine. So now I will speak about this house slova. In Ukrainian, it starts with this S and the Russian too, actually. And it is in shape, like English C. See, it was built specially for writers in Kharkiv. This is from 1926. It's a group of Ukrainian poets and writers who did a very great job actually writing, and also they were kind of in some equilibrium with communists at that time. And they actually believed till the end of 20s that they do have this freedom of performance. So they continue, and at the same time, in Kharkiv there is a utopia kind of idea to build a house especially for writers that would be in the shape of this letter C, And all of the writers will be there, and they will be helping each other to improve their writing, and it will be a great utopian idea of like a ghetto for artists. This idea seemed very appealing. And then there was the event 1929. Things are changing rapidly, actually. 1929, there is a huge event in Moscow. Ukrainian writers come to Moscow. There is a huge reception with the Stalin himself, with all of the Politburo, all of the other communist leaders. And one of the Ukrainian artists, Ostap Vishny, he says, like, okay, give us please money to build this building. And they say that Stalin himself sent him a bag of money during the night. So the building was built. This is the announcement that it is about to be inhabited. The apartments were divided according to some, like throwing the dice. Yes, throwing the dice in this way. They were gambling, like trying to divide the houses. This is how it is still there in Kharkiv. This is how it looks now. And this is how, at the very beginning, the apartments were divided. Those are, like here are most of the prominent Ukrainian writers of that time. I will speak a little bit about Mykola Khvylovy. He was a great Ukrainian writer. He served in the Ukrainian army during this time of independence. And he was very vocal about going as far from Russia as possible. And he would even say, like, away from Moscow. That was his motto that he was promoting. And he would also demand that Russian literature, like Pushkin, yes, Dostoevsky, Tolstoy, to be translated into Ukrainian. So we actually do have translations of this Russian literature into Ukrainian. But it was, this information was hidden for about 50 years after that. We just found out about it recently when we found the actual translations in some archives. And he was the locomotive, an engine of this idea. And of course, this couldn't be appreciated by communists. He even wrote a book, Ukraine or Little Russia. And he was always like standing for Ukraine being a separate nation, and etc. Eventually, he was restricted from the group he worked in. He was restricted then from the Union of Writers, expelled. And we will return to him a little bit later. While they all lived in this house, starting from 1930, there's been also some people from writers were informants of KGB. There were also other informants that were just installed there from the very beginning. Some were headhunted at some point or blackmailed to provide information. So there is a huge archive of denunciations for different Ukrainian writers from this house. That is why we actually can get, well, we cannot trust, this is not a historical source, that is someone complaining about someone. But it gives a lot of information on what they actually talked about, what were the topics, etc. They also say, like there is a saying, it is not scientific, but there is a saying that, yes, Stalin was very bad, but who wrote 2 million of denunciations? And that were actually people. And here I agree with, if you know Marsha Shore, the American scientist, she says, she's got a lecture that she explains that it is always neighbors who give you out. It was always neighbors, because neighbors are those who are jealous or who are irritated by you, etc., etc. So there was a lot of that. Neighbors would spy on you, neighbors would write denunciations. That would happen a lot in this building. And now, can we turn on the... But there will be a short 3 minutes movie. It's a song by contemporary Ukrainian group, rap group, actually. And they did this song first in Ukrainian, then they translated it into English about this house. Yes, we can.
I will never forget May 13, 1933. Shining serene Sunday morning. Suddenly, an unusual commotion broke out in the courtyard of the house. Someone is being led half-conscious, a woman crying, and suddenly, I rushed to his floor. Through the half-open door, I see a bent figure behind the desk. It was as if Khvylovy was merely sleeping, lowering his hands in a tired motion. From the tilted head, just from under the white temple, quietly runs a delicate stream of blood.
It's okay, no, more.
It's just the speaker. Give it a quick second. No, it's good. It was the speaker.
He got it. When they started asking, what are we doing here?
No, it's our speakers.
So his writer should look like.
And then, with his friend's voices as a backdrop, he puts a bullet into his skull. Why? It was a warning. After his friend Ukrainian boy Yelovy was arrested, Khvylovy sensed that to the Soviet authorities, a good Ukrainian writer is a dead one. He even left an ironic suicide note proclaiming,
Long live the Communist Party.
he hoped his friends would flee, hide, and save themselves, but it was too late. The machinery of repression was already in motion. The Slova House became the biggest trap for Ukrainian culture in all of its history. This building, where many Ukrainian writers lived, was a trap, a maze full of microphones, informants, and spies. Even the C-letter shape of the building was another trick, so that the screams won't be heard from the other side of the building. Never before have the Russians conducted such a thorough plan to obliterate Ukrainian culture as a whole. All these names once resided in the same building, and all of them were executed by the Russians. Even Stavrushkin, who received funding from Salem to construct the Slova building, was sentenced to 10 years in the Gulag camps. To numbers, security? Can there be anything frightening about a simple set of digits? Well, they terrify us. In 1930, Ukraine had 259 writers. By 1938, only 36 were left.
Thank you. Yes, so you can find online this video and look it through in total. It's about this building, and it's kind of we call it in Ukraine as Hamilton kind of way, speaking about the history. And I wanted to add some motion to our lecture. So by the by the beginning of World War II, 40 apartments of 66 in the building were affected, and 33 people were shot, and many were sentenced to concentration camps. And that is one of the greatest tragedies. Now we read all of these books, and some books were never published. So we open these parts of the history only right now. And now we move to Maxim Krivtsov to nowadays, to this war. The thing is that after Maidan revolution in Ukraine, there was a great blooming of culture. You know, because Maidan revolution was pro-Ukraine, pro-Europe. It was anti-Russian, and it was a self-awakening of the nation. So a lot of young artists appeared and developed, a lot of writers, poets, and they were very, you know, even when they lived, they were very wanted, well received, and well. Maxim Krivtsov actually joined Ukrainian and armed forces 2014 when the war just started. Then he was demobilized and lived his normal life. In the beginning of the full-scale invasion 3 years ago, he joined army again, and but he did a very interesting thing. He would do an online reading of Ukrainian poetry from 20s and 30s from his shelter in the front lines, basically from the positions. And it was very popular. I remember listening to it, I think it was every Friday, and he would go online and he would read this. He also had a time to publish his book of poetry, which is genius and exceptionally great. I have here also another book about him, recently published, his memories about him, of his family and friends. And he died in the beginning of the last year. He lived in this shelter with a cat. He was very famous for this cat. And at the very beginning, everybody were like, Maxim died together with his cat because he died because of the missile that landed into his shelter on the positions. But then eventually it turned out the cat survived. So it was a bit of a good news, you know. And I will read you a little piece of his poetry. So, she was 54. She worked at a utility company, wore the blue epicenter robe, and rode a bicycle. She painted her nails crimson, painted her lips crimson, and crimson dreams came to her every night. She watched Ukraine's peaks, wiped her tears with a white handkerchief. Remembered her childhood, how warm the sun was back then. Read Kakatushka before going to sleep, and jumped like a swimmer into the water, into her dreams. Crimson like fingernails, crimson like lips. Was waiting for Saturday to dust the rooms, wash clothes, bake a shower, and think about the past. She was killed on March 5, when she returned to her street riding a bicycle, killed as night kills day, as the autumn kills summer, crucified by the burst of KPVT. On the cross, as if on a notice board, it is written, "Here lies number 451, rest in peace." On the streets and in the fields, new Golgothas appeared, but with bullets instead of nails, but with artillery instead of spears. I wanted to count the days until summer, to count kittens, to count children, to count stars, to count 100 while falling asleep. Here lies number 176, rest in peace. Here lies number 201, rest in peace. Here lies number 163, rest in peace. Here lies number 308, rest in peace. This is the piece of his poem that he wrote when the mass graves were opened in Izum area, in the occupied area of the Ukrainian armed forces made like a great success by the occupying life territories over there. And eventually in one of the graves, as it was like a forest with the graves, with the crosses. On each cross there was a number. So he wrote this poetry about different people. There is a bunch of them who were buried in these graves. And this is Volodymyr Vakulenko. He is a writer of children's books. Here's one. I read it aloud to my son. It is called Father's Book. And he was a father of a son. And he was a very nice writer. It's a poetry. It's a nice, funny little poems for children. We'll read it aloud. And during the occupation, he was very pro-Ukrainian artist, and he was in this occupied territory next to Izum. He was arrested. He was there. He was kept in captivity for some time. Then he returned home for 1 day, and he was arrested the next day, and his family never saw him again. And then eventually they found him in the grave number 319. And after the exhumation and DNA test confirmed that it was him, children's writer, who was an enemy for Russians, who was actually executed by Russians during the occupation. So when someone says, okay, let's divide Ukraine, let's give them some territories, that means that people would be dead. People would be dead just for writing their poetry in Ukrainian. So again, it's like history repeating itself. But when he was home for 1 day, he had his diary. The diary he was writing through the days of occupation and bombs. And he took this diary and he buried it in his yard and showed his father, and he said, when ours will come and liberate us, give the diary to our people. And Victoria Amelina, a prominent Ukrainian writer, prominent Ukrainian poet, she was going through the occupied territories and collecting testimonies over there. And she was also helping other international writers as part of PEN, the international network of writers. She was accompanying them to eastern territories, to the battle lines, and to the occupied territories too. So this is her quote from her Facebook page. She would say that the father of Volodymyr dig the hole, tried to find the diary, but it wasn't there. He was very upset. And the only thing she could do was continue looking. And she would dig and dig and dig through the garden until she found the very diary buried in there. Here is the photo of this diary. It was delivered to a Kharkiv Literature Museum. It was then exhibited in Europe, and it was also translated in many languages. I hope that English will be one of them, yet for now I think it's only French, German, and Polish. And I will speak a little bit about Victoria Amelina. Victoria died in Kramatorsk in June 2023. She was there with international journalists. She was just having a dinner in the pizzeria over here, and the Russian missile arrived there. She received a lot of wounds, and she died in the hospital a couple of days later. These are actually my photos from the place. And this is Victoria Amelina over here. This is like a little memorial to people who were having dinner in this place. I think my parents didn't know that I went to Kramatorsk. I didn't want them to be alerted too much because it's very close to battle lines. I was there last summer for a brief visit. And it was important for me to see this place because it's a huge wound, even for me. And then, you know, when night comes and it's time to read books to my child, this is the book by Victoria Amelina for children. about an excavator Echo. That's his name. He's getting into different strange situations like digging out all the sea or other things. Very funny, very curious. My son loves it, but each time I open the book, I remember about Russia killing Victoria, about Russia killing our writers and poets, and this is a huge tragedy. I will read you, by the way, here are 5 copies of Maxim Krivtsov. It's just a couple of his poems translated into English by his foundation of his name, led by his mother and friends. There are 5 copies. Again, you can come here and take one if you would like to take it home and read. It's very nice, really. It's very good. So, and I will read Victoria and Elena now. Only women testify in this strange town. 1 speaks of a missing child. 2 speak of the torture in the basement. 3 speak of the screams in the military headquarters. 4 repeat, "What rapes?" and avert their eyes. 5 speak of the executed in their own yards. 6 speak, but are incomprehensible. 7 check food supplies, counting out loud. 8 call me a liar because there is no justice. 9 talk on their way to the cemetery. I'm also on my way because I know them all in this town. Its dead are my dead. Its survivors are my sisters. 10 speak of a survivor, a man. He could testify. He returned from captivity. I knock on his door. A neighbor opens. It only seems like he has survived, she says. Go talk to the women. And Victoria actually wrote a book called Looking at Women, Looking at War, a War and Justice Diary. It is available on Amazon. You can order it at any time. It's in English. It's translated in many languages, including English. She was collecting testifies of women, a lot of them, and that was kind of her idea of women's sistership. Looking at women, looking at war. Even the name of it is very poetic. And I will read the last one of hers. In a barren springtime field stands a woman dressed in black, crying her sister's names like a bird in the empty sky. She'll cry them all out of herself. The one that flew away too soon, the one that had begged to die, the one that couldn't stop death, the one that has not stopped waiting, the one that has not stopped believing, the one that still grieves in silence. She'll cry them all into the ground as though sowing the field with pain, and from pain and the names of women, her new sisters will grow from the earth, and again will sing joyfully of life. But what about her, the crowd? She will stay in this field forever, because only this cry of hers calls all those swallows in the air. Do you hear how she calls? Each one by her name. And that's, again, her idea of sisterhood. But, you know, Svetlana always tells me that these factions are too depressive. You know, but that's, it's what it is. It's like, war cannot be entertaining, and history of country that is called bloodlands cannot be very funny and entertaining. So most of my joyful jokes were in previous ones. I guess this one is the deepest. But we will finish it with something a little bit better. We will go back to Volodymyr Vakulenko. And here I will conclude with the words of his diary. The first period, I dreamed of numbers, old calendars, friends, and the fellows, as if I were hugging them, meeting them. I'm afraid to think what happens to them. In the first days of the occupation, I was a little bit weak because of my half-starved state. Now I've pulled myself together, I've eaten slowly, gardening, and brought potatoes into the house. The birds only chirp in the morning and in the afternoon. You won't even hear the crows crowing angrily. Finally, in the evening, I'm saved by the music on my cell phone. On Poetry Day, a small crane's flock greeted me in the sky, and I could hear it through their crowing. Everything will be Ukraine. I believe in victory. And this is something where I really want to conclude that we all do believe in Ukrainian victory. And Vladimir Vasylenko believed in victory when he was under occupation. That didn't save him, but Ukraine is still there. Ukraine is still fighting. So our good people in the world are still fighting for the future where we can still be free and individually, all of us, all of the humankind. So this is the last lecture of this series. I really want to thank again the Museum of Salem Gables. I really want to thank the Pro New England who are receiving donations. I want to thank you for coming so many times. I'm not sure if there will be a next lecture. It's possible that we will move to a different country. But it was really a pleasure to see you all during these events. And I'm encouraging you to donate today to be very generous today, to donate to the Bureau New England, to stay with them, to subscribe and maybe make some annual or monthly donation. They're doing a really great job, as there is no more support from American government. We really need the individual support of people. Thank you all for being here.